this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we welcome educator Amy Frank to our Buck and Honey studios. She will share the 5 things that helped her survive a breast cancer diagnosis and thrive the last 14 years. This will be a good one. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up? Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the east side of our great capital city, Madison, Wisconsin. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, the Big X, at Decora 8791, as well as hitting me up on Facebook at Tim Decora. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to the show. Leave us a comment if you'd like what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to tell their story, leave a comment or email me at tdecora@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today wherever you happen to be. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring in the mind. A new episode will be released on Monday and Thursday morning, featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, divorce, success despite challenges, etc., etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. Today, we welcome a special person, good friend of mine, special person in my life, Amy Frank, to our Buck and Honey's remote studios. Born into a military family, Air Force, Amy has lived all over the world. Born in Utah, she has lived in Florida, Germany, and the Wisconsin communities of West Allis and Spring Green. She earned a teaching degree from Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and has enjoyed 26 years in and around the classroom, with the last 6 as a computer teacher at the Wanakee Intermediate School. She has been happily married for 24 years to her husband, Greg, and is a proud mother to Aaliyah and Ethan. Welcome to the show, Mrs. Frank. Amy, what is up?
Life is good.
Life is good. How's the school year been going?
It's actually been going really well. I'm a tech teacher doing some great lessons with kiddos. We're integrating tech with staff, and my home life is great. My boy is thriving as a senior in high school, and my daughter is doing well. She's directing a play actually in college. She's a junior in musical theater at Milliken.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're all doing well.
Well, on my notes here, I have Aaliyah is in her 2nd year. Was that right?
She's a junior, so third.
3rd year at Milliken University. Got to do my fact checking a little bit better. And Ethan is a senior in high school.
Yeah.
That means you'll be empty nesting soon. You got to be looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, Greg and I are practice empty nesting every once in a while. Like we'll go to a Badger game or something by ourselves and, like do it up, go out, have a dinner and a drink beforehand, fun stuff. No,
Yeah.
They don't need us as much because they're bigger. So.
Well, if you want to find out what to do as an empty nester, you can go to my Facebook, and there's a lot of cool things you can.
You've been traveling a lot.
I've been traveling and seeing the United States. I hope to see the world at some point, but yeah, I also was doing some, I say, stalking on Facebook, and I use that in quotes, just looking at seeing what you were up to. I see you posted an awesome Veterans Day photo of your dad. I thought that was very cool. I think that's just cool when people do that to remember or honor loved ones, and in this case, your dad. Tell the listeners about your, I guess, dad first, and then we'll go with maybe mom.
Sure. So my dad was in the Air Force for 20 years. That's why I got to travel over the world. So he's definitely my favorite veteran, and he comes to my school every year and talks to all the 6th graders about being a veteran, but he talks specifically about the Vietnam War. So I'm super proud of his service, and I love to make sure I recognize him on Veterans Day. And my parents, amazingly, are still married. There's a very high divorce rate for people that are in the military. I think it's because they travel a lot. whoever's in the service is gone on deployments for a while, and then, the other spouse is dealing with the home life and things breaking and all those things. And my parents made it through, which is pretty awesome. They're still married. They've been married for 50 years, which is great.
50,
Yeah.
50 years, almost as long as I've been alive. Crazy,
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And then you talk about your mom a little bit.
So my mom, I go see them every Wednesday night for dinner and hang out with them. I just like to see them on a weekly basis. And she is a crafter, so she is always showing me her projects, and I get a little bit of that from her, which is fun. So, yeah.
Well, I had a guest on last week, Thursday, Mike Chamberlain, and he does some really great pinstriping. Maybe we can put your mom, if she's got a website, we can slide her stuff in there and get her. Maybe I can get a little cut of that, but we'll see. So that is very cool. Just going to get to our sponsor here quick. Our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, are making an impact in the communities where they are, very much like you have with the Wanakee Community School District that you work in. Great food, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere are what keep people coming back, with locations in Sun Prairie. I know somebody who lives in Sun Prairie, Monona, Wanakee, and Mount Horeb. There's one close by. Have you been to Buck and Honey's?
I actually go there quite a bit. We live close to the one in Sun Prairie. It's walking distance, which is a bit dangerous, but I love the food there. I love the, like the food, the table to food. I'm not saying it right, but
Farm to table,
yes,
I think.
Yes, farm to table. But I also love I can have a beverage and I can walk home and not worry about that. So that's good.
I'm a big foodie, so I know that farm to table.
Yes, it's delicious. Yeah.
So we're going to get to segment one. Segment one, again, is going to last about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're going to talk about the diagnosis. I remember, I think, when that kind of occurred, and it sent some waves throughout the school district, because at that time, I think had been there for close to 10 years, I think. And so everybody had gotten to know who you are, and because you've made an impact. And we're going to talk a little bit about the before the diagnosis, and then we'll kind of lead into segment two, but you'll talk about the diagnosis and then a little bit of the after. But before your diagnosis, you were a dedicated and busy mother who would get upset about things that you shouldn't. And I often, and probably some of the listeners are in this crowd as well. Unfortunately, I don't know that Amy. I only know the kind, caring, and compassionate Amy. Tell the listeners, tell me about Angry Amy.
Well, I used to get worked up about things I really didn't need to get worked up about. So, for example, if my husband's driving and he misses the turn, I would lose my mind in the car with him. Dude, why did you do that? Blah, 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 blah. And then in hindsight, it's is this really that important?
Kind of like the mic right now.
Yeah,
so
it's not behaving.
It's not behaving right now.
So I think after I got sick, perspective was it was really important for me to think about what's really a big deal, what's really worthwhile to get worked up about. And my husband missing a turn is not one of those things. So
yeah, I think we can all relate to that at some point, and then maybe it takes something like a diagnosis of some kind or some news to really put into, like you said, perspective. So you often brought work home, and then after the kids went to bed, you would start working. And I'm going to guess that's probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I don't think you're the only teacher that does that. That's kind of a common thing with teachers, depending upon the discipline that you're in. I mean, if you're English, you're correcting essays and reading papers. If you're math, you're looking and making comments about why something was right or wrong. And you're probably doing some reading in maybe history and thinking about things. You're not any different than any other teacher. They just bring a lot of stuff home. and prepping for the next day. So kind of maybe tell us a little bit about what was that like for you?
Well, I didn't get a lot of sleep because you have littles and they don't sleep through the night typically, or they're getting up really early. When they'd go to bed, I would do some grading of papers, and I'd usually watch TV with my husband nearby so I could grade papers and feel like I was at least connecting a little bit with them. But it does impact your life. I got a little bit better about that after I was sick. I still fell into that some. I was a math and science teacher for a long time. I taught ELA and social studies. And I used to remember like volunteering to take my son to like karate so I could sit in the parking lot and grade papers and not feel guilty about it.
Mm-hmm.
My new job, there's a lot more balance. I do bring some work home, but very rarely. I work hard when I'm at work. I have a much more flexible schedule as a tech teacher. So it's important. But I do read a lot about happiness and finding balance. And there's a book that I read called like the 40-hour work week for teachers. And it really talks about like understanding like what do I really need to do and what do I want to do. And there's sometimes when you want to do something because it's fun, like doing a video editing project is fun, and maybe I'll put a little bit extra time into that because I'm enjoying it kind of as a hobby. But did I really need to do that? So then you just have to think about that when you're doing some of those projects.
Yeah, I know when we talked off air about teachers and they're just kind of working constantly, and there's a couple parts to that. They just like the work that they're in. They definitely care about their kids and they want to provide the best lessons, et cetera, et cetera. And you definitely weren't any different. And the second question I had about that is, did that have an impact on your home life?
Oh, for sure. At the beginning of my career, I would give my phone number out to kids to call me to ask questions about math problems.
Now they can email you.
Well, they can email me. I don't give out my number, but I also we changed how we taught. Like we would have the kids maybe doing some of that homeworky stuff now in the classroom instead of going home and doing it unsupported. So it's just kind of a mind shift a little bit about how do we support kids, because some kids don't have parents that are at home at night that can help them with math or know how to help them with the math. So you need to make sure you maybe kind of flip your classroom a little bit. But the problem with teaching is that our product is a human being, and we're putting out like good human beings, good citizens. It's not just like I'm making a car or I'm making this or, it's hard. And you want to do everything you can within that day that you're with the kids. And that's one thing I had to come to terms with is like, I can control what happens with those children when I'm at school. I can't control what happens outside of school, unfortunately. But I also need to be mindful that I have two of my own children at home that I need to help raise and be good human beings and enjoy my time with them. So it was important to think about that balance piece.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job with those two. I don't know Aaliyah as well as I do Ethan, and he's just a bright light in the school day. But the other thing as you were talking, and I forgot to hit this earlier, is that a lot of the jobs that are out there, you can come in and punch a clock, time card at 7:45, school day, I'm thinking, and then at 3:45 you're done. And that's it. And you can go home and play in a softball league, play in a dart league, play volleyball, go for a walk, cook. But you still maybe have to do all of those things. And then once everybody goes to sleep, then the teacher comes out in you. And I don't know if a lot of listeners understand that about teachers, but that's kind of what they do. And that's how they're built.
I just surprised a kid. I went up to him in the hall and I said to him, "Hey dude, you crushed it in tech class yesterday. I just want to give you that compliment. And I'm going to email your parents and let them know that too." And I said, when I was laying in bed last night thinking about my day and thinking about my interactions with my students, you were the one who popped in my head, and I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. And he just sat there with this dumbfounded look on his face, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, is this odd for you? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, one, that's what teachers do. We sit in bed and we think about what could we have done better, or what do we, what was good of that day. And it was nice and funny kind of to share with him and him to be a little bit surprised. And then, I emailed parents and I got a really nice response back, which was great. So
Yeah, it's good that you have all of those tricks of the trade after 26 years. So if we've got some listeners that are in the first, second, or third year, yeah, do all of those little things, but you gotta put some time in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to put some time in. So I talked about this as well. I've known you since your arrival in Wanakee, and I remember someone mentioning your name, or if we were at a professional development, and your last name is spelled like Frank, Frank, but pronounced Frank. And I had a student at the first school that I taught at that had the same pronunciation, but it was Fronk. And I figured that you might have been a relative of his because Spring Green is not very far from Hillsboro, where I had taught, and realized you spelled it differently. You and I helped co-create about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, the staff support group for the Wanakee Community School District. And that's kind of where our friendship kind of grew a little more because we had to collaborate with each other. But we're going to get into kind of the lead into the segment 2. Let's go back to the summer of 2010. You had turned, I don't know if I should tell anybody because this will kind of date you a little
Well,
bit.
I didn't turn it yet
You
when
didn't?
this happened.
Okay. You had turned 35 somewhere in there that summer. Can you describe to the listeners, and I'll add to that a little bit, but what kind of happened?
So I had this really fun tradition, and I actually haven't done it since the summer of 2010, but every anniversary, I would shower and I would put on my wedding dress, and we would take pictures of me in my wedding dress. So I have pictures actually of that day. And I changed out of my wedding dress, and it was kind of a funny day because my daughter was sick, so I let her take some of the pictures, and she enjoyed that. And I have a picture of me with my son Ethan, who was 3, and he was super cute, and my husband, of course, was in the pictures too. But after I took the dress off, we all climbed into our big king-size bed, and we were watching TV together, and I just remember like rubbing my hand against my chest, and I felt a lump. And that is when things changed. That was the moment.
I was going to say I was on a podcast earlier in June, and they had, we were hoping that they would have that, like a little button that you could press and it would go, "Aww." So when I'm thinking about you putting your wedding dress on and it probably fit just like the day you put it on the very first time, right?
Well, I was like heavier when I got married because we lived in an apartment for 3 years, and apartment living is not good for like your health, I don't think, because you just like come home from work. And I was carpooling over an hour each way to my job because I was working in Waterford at the time.
A lot of mac and cheese and bologna
Probably,
sandwiches.
yeah, because you're poor too, right? You're paying those school loans. So it did fit. Now today, it would not fit. I know that for a fact.
But yeah, if I could have hit the aw button, I would have hit that aw button. So we're coming up on the halfway point of the show. It's been going great so far. But before we take a little break, I want to mention again the sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants. They sponsored the remote studios since podcast 1. And I'm darn glad for that. They facilitate the fun and ensure each guest has a memorable experience at a great value with 4 locations in the Madison area. People keep coming back. So you are I'm going to set the table here for segment 2. You are a 14-year cancer survivor, and the school district that I used to work for and you currently work for were the Warriors. And in my book, you're a warrior.
Well, thank you.
Having to go through what you had to go through. But following your diagnosis, you had some surgery, some therapy, and started on the road to recovery. And there was kind of a new normal. You'll share some of your memories and coping skills during and after the diagnosis and how you learned to survive and thrive in segment 2. And you're going to, I think, help 1 or 2 listeners, but I think you're going to help a lot more than that just because that's who you are. So we are going to hopefully stay tuned. Don't change that channel. Stay here. If you, a loved one, or someone you know who is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help or resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Crisis Services, dial 911. Suicide Prevention Lifeline, call 988. To connect via web chat, go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to utter 3 words: I need help. Now back to the show. One, we are back. We are back. We are back. Segment 2. Glad you could join us here in the Buck and Honey's remote studios, wherever you happen to be. We are going to be talking about coping with family, work, and a new normal. So Amy already talked about her diagnosis, and we're going to delve into that a little bit. We're going to put our teacher hat on a little bit, and we're going to talk about your diagnosis, and then I want you to educate our listeners a little bit so that when they get to this, if unfortunately somebody has the same diagnosis, they can go to Survive and Thrive 8791. You got to listen to this. Amy Frank, she got the same diagnosis you did, and here she is 14 years later surviving and really thriving. Go to that because she's got some great stuff. But we'll kind of bounce around a little bit. But so let's set the table here. The summer of 2010, you received the life-altering diagnosis of stage 3C breast cancer. And again, I've heard of breast cancer, and unfortunately, I know some people who have breast cancer. At that time, you were a mother to 2 beautiful children, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and had just marked your 10-year wedding anniversary. For the people that are listening right now, 3C, what can you let us know what that is?
So they don't know what stage your cancer is, and I think things have changed a little bit, in the last 14 years. Treatment definitely has, and how they attack it is a little bit different. But for me, first of all, it took a while for me to get diagnosed because I felt the lump on June 10th. And I went in a couple days later to have my doctor feel the lump, and she felt a second lump. And then she said, well, you're too young. I don't think it's probably cancer, but let's just, dot our I's and cross our T's. So she sent me to go get,
mammogram?
I think I did. Yeah, I think I did do a mammogram first. Yes, I did. And my breasts were way too dense. They couldn't see anything. So then, because that's typical for young women. So then they said, you need to do an ultrasound. Well, of course, none of these things happen on the same day. It's like a week and a week. They just start to add up. So I did an ultrasound, and they saw a whole bunch of stuff in the ultrasound. And I knew it was bad when they said, we need you to wait here. We need to have the radiologist look at your scan and let us know if we need to take more images. And he actually pulled me into his office and kind of was like, we need to do a biopsy. So then you do a biopsy, a needle core biopsy, and then they did an MRI. So I felt the cancer on June 10th. I wasn't officially diagnosed until July 17th because of 4th of July in there too. The doctors were on vacation. And then they scheduled me for surgery. So my surgery was August 2nd, and they didn't know how bad the cancer was until they officially went in. They did do an MRI right before. And when they showed that to me, my right breast just lit up, meaning that it was just chock full of cancer. My tumor was big.
I want to actually back up for a second.
Sure.
So you talked about having a lump, and then your doctor felt a second lump. If it's not cancer, did your doctor say that it could just be this or this? If it's not cancer, I mean, just for the listeners that are out there that are listening, what could it have been?
Well, women who are menstruating sometimes just have lumpy boobs depending on the time of month. So it could have been that. When they did the ultrasound, I could see that it didn't look good. If it's a cyst, which isn't necessarily bad always, it's usually like circular. And the image I was seeing definitely had like fingers coming out from it. That's why they call it cancer, because it kind of has like crab legs coming out of it. Yeah, so that I kind of knew. And then we had to so the MRI like lit up. My tumor was huge. And I had a fight to have my other breast removed because I was nervous about it being in both. My grandma did have breast cancer when she was 49. It was my dad's mom. And I was always told, oh, don't worry about her because it's on your dad's side, of the paternal side. It won't be an issue, but it actually doesn't matter. I don't have any of the genes. So I did do genetic counseling to see if I had the BRCA1 or 2 genes. I didn't. But they think there might be some environmental factors and also some hereditary factors. I grew up on military bases, and one of the bases I grew up on, when I was born there was actually toxic waste like coming out of orange sludge coming out of the well water from like years of them dumping airplane oil and stuff in the ground. So my mom didn't breastfeed, so that was what was in my bottles, that water. So it's a developmental time. So there's probably, I'll never know why I got sick, but yeah, so that was kind of the start of it.
Yeah, I kind of want to try to educate our listeners that if this kind of does happen, or if we have somebody that just happens to be listening for the joy of me, but if it's just a random listener and they happen to listen just to you talk and me talk, and it's the next episode, somebody could pick up on this and have a loved one talk about they found a lump, and this kind of helps them understand it a little bit better. So after the initial shock of the diagnosis, what did you do to keep a level head as a wife, mother, and a teacher? Because you talked about July 17th and then August, and then all of a sudden that's the time that you're supposed to be enjoying the summer, your time off, and then getting ready for school.
Sure. So my husband and I actually knew I was going through all this testing when I turned 35. So we threw a huge birthday party for me that summer, and everyone who came didn't know that we were in the midst of this kind of awfulness. So we did try and plan fun. That helped a lot. When I was first diagnosed, one of the first things we did is we went to the Cave of the Mountains with the kids and just had a good time. Like, I just wanted to be with the people I love most of all. My brother came over with his family. My sister was actually down when I was diagnosed. She just had a little baby and was down visiting me. She eventually moved down, but we would do like dance parties with all these little kids in my house. So we would do that kind of stuff. I definitely would cry in the shower by myself. That was one thing I needed to like deal with my emotions.
I know some people that are listening might be, okay, yeah, you're doing some of these fun things, but was it in the back of your mind, or was it in the forefront? Was it always there? Where was it?
It took a long time for me that not to be something I thought about every day, like years. I think like when you're first diagnosed, you're just busy dealing with the business of being sick. So like, I think now they have these nurses or care teams that work together. Like, I had to call to make an appointment with my oncologist. I had to call to make an appointment with my plastic surgeon. I had to make a call, so it was just a lot of calling and going to appointments. So you just were busy with that, really.
Well, I think now we fast forward to, that was 2010, 2024. I know some people that, again, have been diagnosed with some cancer, but it's all laid out for them now. Maybe that's what over time things have evolved, where you had to make the call. Now somebody's calling you and telling you where to be and what to do, and here's who you're going to be seeing. So I think things have evolved over that time. So did you seek any counsel from someone who traveled that? And I see you're getting a smiley face, and I know who this person is as well, and it makes me smile too when I think about her, about getting a diagnosis, either exactly like yours or something different, but it's cancer. So go ahead.
So for a while, I didn't know if I was going to take off that year. I thought I would try and work because my surgeon kept telling me, you can work. A lot of women work through this. And finally, I saw my oncologist, and he's like, you're a teacher. You have no flexibility in your life. You should probably take the year off. And so I decided to take the year off. But our custodian at the time, Rich, I love him to death. He's this great guy. He knew about my journey and was upset about it. And there was another staff member in a neighboring school who had fought and was actually fighting cancer again. And her name was Sari. And he gave her my name. And she called me out of the blue because he kept saying to me, like, hey, why don't you call Sari? Why don't you call Sari? And I didn't want to. I wanted to be like in denial land and not like have to talk to someone about this. But it was one of the best things that he did for me, and definitely Sari did for me. So she was, she had brain cancer, which is a very different cancer. But she sat down with me. We ate a meal together. She actually took me to go wig shopping, which was awesome because where I was an SSM patient and they didn't hand out wigs at the time. UW Carbone Center does give wigs to their patients, which is great. Yeah, it's super. But I had to buy mine, and then she told me you need to go get it styled. So she went with me to the hairstylist and got it styled around my face, which was great. And she would talk to me, and she was a wonderful resource. But so she did that for me. And then eventually she started like kind of distancing herself from me. And the reason why is because she knew she was dying. And that was one of the hardest things to do, was to go to her funeral with a bald head, knowing that my mortality was like in question. And hear this dear person to me, and someone who helped me.
Kind of like a mentor.
Yeah, didn't make it, right? And her service was gorgeous. It was actually at the elementary school, and they had all the kids like decorate the bulletin boards with flowers. And I remember like people hugging me because they hadn't seen me for a while and happy I was there. But that was tough. But because of her, I try and pay it forward anytime I find out about someone who's sick, because I think that's important and healthy for me. It makes me feel like I'm taking a horrible thing in my life and hopefully making someone else's journey just a little bit better, because no one wants to be a member of this club. But, if you know of someone who is, you want to make it as good as you can for them.
Yeah, I've talked to some of my some of the guests that I've had on here that you're going to be around on that you're going to have a digital footprint forever.
That's a little scary.
That's a little scary, but you're always going to be there. I'll always be there. People can listen to you, but again, it's one of those things where if you are mentoring somebody and they can't get a hold of Amy, they can always go to the podcast because your voice is here, and you'll be able to talk them through kind of some of the things that have helped you, which is leads into, and I don't know how many of these things that you got from Sari or you adopted and changed to fit you. But that's the other thing too, is I think different people handle things differently. Somebody might take these 5 things you're going to talk about and only 3 work. You just got to figure out for you what works best for you. So if you were to give somebody some advice, was the question, on getting a diagnosis such as this, I asked, what 3 to 5 things that helped you the most. And the first thing you said was feed your soul. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So the doctors are working on your body, right? That's their job, is to fix your body, but you need to do stuff that helps your soul and yourself mentally. So for me, because I'm a teacher, I still needed to be an active member of the world. I knew when I had my kids, I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom. I'd go a little bit crazy, a little bit batty, being home all the time with them. I needed to be out there. So even though it was at great risk to my health, I volunteered at my daughter's school every week when I was feeling up to it. She was a first grader at the time. And then I would also volunteer in my classroom once a month. And that is a bizarre thing, to go into a school, into your classroom, and see someone else teaching the kids that you're supposed to be working with that year. She did a fabulous job. Shannon was my sub, and she actually worked for the district for a while after that. But I knew I needed to do stuff that made me productive. So, and my daughter's teacher, Emily Peterson, she's still a good friend of mine today. She just made sure I did stuff like, get the things ready for the crafts that we were going to be doing, or work in the book room. So I wasn't necessarily working with snotty nosed, first graders, but I was still around kids and feeling productive.
I think that's a good diversion of you're keeping yourself busy. And you talked about the cancer being right at the forefront of everything you were thinking about. And when you're tying a little first grader's shoes or wiping their nose, you're not thinking about your diagnosis. So that's a good thing. Number 2 was allow others to help. And I think that you had already alluded to that. Was there anybody else besides Sari?
Oh, there were a lot of people that helped. I never felt more loved than when I was sick. People came out of the woodworks doing amazing things for me and my family. My school raised a ton of money for us and gave us Build-A-Bear gift cards, and we had a fun field trip and got Build-A-Bears.
We need that aw button. Aw.
It was so fun. We went and did it. Each of the kids made a bear, and then I went in a closet, and one message was a I love you message using their nickname, and one was a good night message, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to put them to bed every night, because sometimes I'd be at the hospital. So my son still has his, and it's still in his room. Coco. The buttons don't work anymore. The bear has, after 14 years, it's been through some rough times. So we've had that. We had neighbors mow our lawn, another neighbor pick up my daughter from school every Wednesday and feed her dinner and take her to religion. Wednesdays were my chemo days. So that was the day that I did not feel good at all. I was usually in bed. We had tons of people bring us food. We got a warm meal delivered every Monday. And people fed us like we were a small army instead of just 2 adults and 2 young kids. We had plenty of leftovers after that. But then on Tuesdays, we'd have a freezer meal delivered so that we could eat that later in the week. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we had great people.
The one thing I want to just touch on, and I don't have data for this, so maybe somebody can put that in the comments, that you accepted that help. That is one thing that's completely different than the people say, no. This is not necessary at all. Thank you for that, and would shut that down immediately. And you're here telling us that it was probably part of the recovery process that you were able to accept those kind of things from those people.
Right. And there were some things that people offered that I just didn't want. And that's important, because I went to, I remember this one time I went to go get chemo, and there was this lady who maybe was in her 40s, and she had her 20-year-old niece there translating for her. And the question was, do you have life insurance, or do you have insurance? And she says, no, she had no insurance. And I knew one of the pills I was going to take is $500. And I knew my chemo and my surgeries and everything were thousands of dollars. I'd rather you do a fundraiser for someone like that, not me. And that's a big reason why I'm part of I do stuff with the UW Carbone Center, and there's this big thing called the Shenanigans, and it's actually next week, where they raise money for women who need help, where they need to cover rent, they need maybe gas cards, they need a hotel to stay because maybe they don't live in Madison and they live far away and they need a hotel room. They give them wigs. They do the ice caps now so they can save their hair during treatment. So that's a really cool thing that I can do. I
think what we'll do is, I've done this for the last couple of guests, is that maybe you can send me some of those links if there's links about something and somebody wants to donate or help.
Sure.
I think those are great causes. We'll go to number 3 here. See the humor in your situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, having cancer is really serious, right? It's kind of a bummer. So I tried to find humor anywhere I could. I couldn't read heavy books or watch heavy movies. I didn't have the attention span to watch a real movie. So we would watch a lot of videos of the kids, home videos. We watched a lot of those because I love them. And I would watch a lot of comedy, acts and things like that. But one thing is I would try and take the situations I was in and see the humor. Before surgery, I'm standing there naked and a doctor is drawing all over my body as to where they're taking things out of me, right? And, make a joke about that. Or when I met with my plastic surgeon, he's taking pictures of my breasts and I'm like, oh, do my earrings match the gown? And he's like, I'm not taking pictures of your face. I'm like, I know you're not. I'm just trying to be funny. So making jokes about, kind of some of the craziness that you're kind of in. It's kind of funny.
But that's I talk about this in my presentations about my anxiety, and I always say there's two sides to a coin. There's a heads and a tails, but then I would always say there's a negative and then there's a positive, or there's a not funny. And in your case, there's a funny, and there could be that very serious Amy, that angry Amy, that you got this, and you decided to flip that coin over and look at the humorous stuff. So that's another great thing that I guess I didn't think of, but yeah, knowing you and your humor, and yeah, I love it. Number 4, you talk about finding a support group. So go ahead.
So I first tried to go to a support group that was for just breast cancer survivors. I went to it twice. I always tried everyone twice, every group. And it was a bunch of older ladies in their 70s and 80s talking about having breast cancer, and I couldn't relate to them. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I found a group at Gilda's Club, and it was for young cancer survivors. So they have any kind of cancer, but they're under 40. And that was an amazing group. I went to that. I also went to this really cool trip, First Ascents. If you look it up, they provide...
First Ascent?
First Descent.
Oh, Descent. Okay.
And they provide an adventure field trip for a cancer survivor or thriver that's under 40. So I went rock climbing in the Shenandoah Mountains for a week, and all I had to pay for was my airfare. So some of those people became my support group. But I also just found I had people already in my life. Like my family was an amazing support group for me. My sister and my dad and my brother, everyone. They would take turns. So my husband would come to chemo with me one time, and the other time it would be someone else. And then we'd be back to my husband, so that he was there every other time. But it also gave me a chance to enjoy time with someone else as I'm sitting in a chemo bay for, 6-8 hours, right? This is nothing compared to, like, if my kids had cancer, that would be devastating to me. Me having cancer wasn't as devastating as if someone else in my life that I cared a lot about.
And I think you're talking about one of the big things in the recovery world is you talk to Sari. She's a teacher. She had cancer. She knows the travel, and she knows about the teaching as well as the cancer. And then your husband doesn't have cancer. He doesn't know how you feel. But when you got into these support groups and you were around other people, that's, again, part of the recovery is that you're talking and learning and hearing and having discussions with people that have walked the same path you have.
Well, and he was so close to it, right? Like, I remember wanting to talk to him about, like, if I die, these are some things I want. Like, if I die, it is okay if you find some other woman and you marry and she is a wonderful mother to our children. He did not want to have that conversation. It was too close to him. So it was nice being able to go. Like, even one of my dear friends at work, Amy, she had never had cancer, but she was a phenomenal listener. So just finding those people that are willing to listen to you. And she'd say to me, like, Amy, you need to think of, like, okay, so I had chemo for 6 months, and then I had radiation, and then after radiation, I had reconstructive surgery, and then they found out my thyroid wasn't working, and then they found out I needed my ovaries removed. It was like a year and a half of treatment. And at the beginning, I remember saying to me, Amy, think of it like you're having a baby. Like, you're fighting this for 9 months, and you're going to come out the other side a new person. And it's true. I mean, that's what I had to do. And I had to break it up into small chunks. But there are people everywhere. I ended up also having to go, I went and saw an oncology therapist. That was phenomenal. She actualized everything like I was feeling after I was done. I think the hardest time mentally was right when I was done with all the treatment. You're not getting chemicals put into your body, and you're hopeful that whatever was in there is all gone, but you don't know, right? So this constant thinking, like, is it coming back? Is it coming back? Is it coming back? And my doctors weren't completely honest with me for a long time, I think because I was young, and they're human. They don't want to, like, give me bad news. But eventually my radiation oncologist, I sat him down and I was like, okay, I have little kids. I have radiation. Now this is the summer of 2011 are going to be coming up here. Like, should I just do stuff with my kids, or should I like plan activities for them and run them around and stuff? And he's like, the chances of you being here in 5 years are 50-50. I suggest you spend time with your kids. He was the first person to say that to me. And I had been going through treatment and had surgery and chemo already for 6 months. But he gave me that. So he was a good support. Like that made me live my life differently because he was honest with me. So you can find your support people all over, and it can be someone that you talk to all the time, or it could be someone that you just talk to once, but just looking for those people to help you work through what you're going through.
And somebody giving you what you need, and that's what you needed. Somebody else might say, no, I don't need the straight truth. I want to go ahead and sugarcoat it. And then maybe everything in between. So the last item you talked about was number 5 is journaling. And this is something that I do every day. And I'm glad that you said this. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about journaling.
I am a horrible writer, like not a good writer, not a good speller.
Same here.
I read some of the stuff I write and I'm like, oh, that is horrible. But I was carrying this stuff around all the time. I have anxiety, depression. I can't shut my brain off sometimes. And I would be laying in bed and finally I would get up and I'd go and journal. And I actually use Caring Bridge. It was a free service and I would journal in there. And that was a way for me to like tell people how I was doing, because I didn't want people to come up to me and ask me how I was doing or how my treatment was going with my littles around. I wanted to just enjoy my kids. And if they're with me, them to enjoy our time together, not talking about kind of this heavy stuff. But what I was so surprised at how it like lifted stuff off my shoulders. Like if I had some heavy stuff, I had a bunch of news that I was like thinking about for a while. I put it on paper and it just felt like I could let it go. And even today, I printed off my Caring Bridge journals and made them into books. And my kids each have a copy of it. Because if something were to happen to me, I want them to know what I went through, because they're my kids. They have my genes. In the olden days, like women, they would say, oh, I have back cancer. And it was actually like uterine cancer. They didn't want to talk about it. I want my kids to know exactly what I went through just in case. So the journaling now is, out there in the interwebs. People can find it. But it's also a hard copy book for my family.
I don't know if we can stick that link in there somewhere too, because somebody might be able to get something off of there. If it's 10 people across the planet, that's 10 people that you're helping. And really with the journaling part, you can maybe see that you went through a bad day 2 months ago, and then you go through a bad day. Well, what did I do 2 months ago that day or the next day to get out of that? And it's always a good reference point when you're journaling.
Well, one of the books I read a lot of books. I went to like cancer college, I used to say, because I was reading all these books about cancer. And my favorite book was called The Crazy Sexy Cancer Tips book. And it was about a young person who had gone through cancer and her tips. And some of it I didn't agree with and some of it I totally did. But she also made a workbook that I found later that I journaled in. It was like a journaling workbook that also helped me kind of put my thoughts down. I would ask these like thought-provoking, questions for you to kind of reflect on and put on paper. So there's great stuff out there for sure.
We might have to stick that in there
Oh my goodness, all these links.
So, well, you are the computer teacher, so you might be able to do that. So what an episode. You shared a tough life-altering experience. You epitomized the survive and thrive mentality. It wasn't easy after the diagnosis, just listening here today, but you survived and have thrived. You received the cancer diagnosis, continued to be a great wife, a mother. You did take a year off as a teacher, but came back to the classroom, and you've been and thrived during your treatment phase. A lot of people get that diagnosis and struggle with their mental health. They turn to substances, and unfortunately, even some people give up, and you didn't. And you probably, because you have a husband and you got kids and you love what you do. I'm kind of filling in the blanks for you, but you weren't ready to go, and you've got a purpose in life, and today you're kind of adding to that purpose by being on this podcast and helping. So You received a diagnosis that was the same, or if you receive a diagnosis that's the same or similar to Amy's, she just shared an experience that our listeners can learn from. Um, Talked about feeding the soul, allow others to help, see the humor in your situation, find your support group, journaling. Before we shut her down, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think it's really important you just find your purpose, right? And once you have that in your head, you're going to attack whatever you're going through because you know that you have a purpose in life. So I am right. You're right. Some people I've seen give up. I just had too much to live for and I understood my purpose. And before I got sick, I always wondered if I really should be a teacher, if I should quit because it is a very stressful job and do something else. I have tech skills. I could go and work somewhere else and make a lot more money and have a very flexible schedule. But I knew when I couldn't work for that year because I chose not to because I wanted my energy to be for my kids, I knew that's where I needed to be. So if you think about any hard stuff you're going through, think about your purpose. Like your purpose now is making this amazing podcast. You know, it's paying off. You're helping other people. That's great. So just always think about what your purpose is in life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And had you decided to not come back to teaching, we wouldn't have had the relationship that we've had for the last 2 or 3 years. And I feel fortunate that our situations have brought us together as colleagues, as friends. And I wanted to make sure that you were able to tell your story because of your background in teaching. And you want to help people. You're not angry, Amy, thankfully. You're compassionate and caring and all of those things I said.
Angry Amy sometimes, but I just save that for special occasions.
Special occasions. So on our next episode, we will have another amazing guest who will share how they survived and thrive. If you have a story to share or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecora@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.